Now to start on the design of the welcome screen and the button to start a new game. We will drag a label that will contain a bold text, welcome to, and we will center it with a large font type. We're going to name the widget label welcome in camel. We're going to set the properties bold equals true and size equals large. Then we are going to drag another label that will contain the text quizzes games, again in bold and centered with a primary color and with a font size extra large. I'm going to name the widget label quizzes game, again in camel. We're going to set the properties bold equals true, size equals extra large, and we are going to reutilize the button we initially added through the outliner, moving it below the two labels. This is with a simple drag on the outliner tree. We will use the text for the button create new game, again center it using primary color, and we're going to use the large font. The widget name will be button create game in camel. I'm going to set the size equals large, and to separate the button a little bit more, we are going to add padding on top, and we're going to make it a large padding. We do the same thing for the welcome to label. To separate a little bit more from the top, we select the widget and look for the padding top on the details and select large. This makes for the whole design, so we're going to start with the logic or behavior of this welcome screen. To define the logic for the button, we are going to click on the logic tab on top, and in the events section we right click and search the associated event for the button create game _ click. This will create a function that will be called each time the button is clicked. This function only needs to help us navigate to the CmpStartGame component that will handle the player name and topic selection to start the game. We look for the navigation block key on the left. We drag it, then we select the UI component, CmpStartGame, and on the start model we pass an empty object with the curly brackets. Now for a quick test, we are going to click on run on the upper right, and we can see an error. This error tells us that we cannot navigate to a component without defined routing. This means that for the components to be accessible through navigation, we need to define this routing. If we don't do that, the only way to access the component is to insert them into another component using a repeater or a dynamic container. In this case, we will create a route for the component. So we open CmpStartGame, we go to the logic tab, and on the routing section on the right, we add the route, and we will call it /start-game. If we run the app again, we can see that the solution runs without problems now. Now let's click on servers, quizzes, mobile app. We can see the application running. So we click on it, and on the preview, we can see how it's going to be rendering the CmpHome, and see that if we click on the create new game button, we can navigate to the CmpStartGame. So now we can start designing this component. Firstly, we will delete the label we added to identify the component on the last test. We can see that the deleted widgets go to the recycling bin called unused, where they can be recovered if we delete them by mistake. Since we won't be using this one anymore, we will permanently delete with the right click, delete all. Well, to start creating the screen, we will need a text box to insert the player name. We're going to name it text box player name. And use the label name. We add a large padding for the top. And now for the topics selection, we are going to be using a combo box. We are going to call it combo box topic and use topic for the label. We are going to choose a data format for the combo box. In this case, we will use key value pair, and we will see now when we reach the logic. Lastly, we are going to use a button that will start a game. We are going to name it button start game. And the text start game. We set the color for success, size large, center it, and that should be enough for the design of this component. This component's logic will deal with several behaviors. One is filling the topic lists using microservice requests. Another is validating the player names and topic fields to not be empty before starting a game, showing an alert if that happens. Also, it's going to be doing a start game request on the microservice to get a new game started. And lastly, it will have to navigate to a new component called CMP round that will show the current round. Now for a quick test for the combo box data loading, we are going to run the application. And in here we can verify that the data from the microservice is loaded properly for the combo box we just created. Let's start with loading the topic for the combo box. Since in this page we need to see the field combo from the beginning, we need to launch the load from the main_init event. So we go to the events section, we right click and select the main init event. In here we need to make a call for the microservice to obtain a list of all the topics so that we can fill the combo box. We create a variable named topics of type list quizzes microservice.topic. We are going to be sending null arguments since we are not trying to filter any topic from the complete list. Once we get the list, we need to fill the information onto the combo box. So we are going to use the load blocky. The first parameter is our combo box identifier. And the second parameter is the element to be displayed on the combo box. This will take two kinds of formats. The first one is plain, that will show a plain list of values. The combo box will basically display an expandable list with all the values. And the second one is the key value pair. And this is basically a list of pair. The first element is the key, and the second element is the displayed value. The combo box will only show the value, but will store the selected key for later use. As we saw in the design, we selected key value on the data format, so we need to map the topic list to a key value list so that the combo box can interpret and visualize accordingly. We are going to be using the map function for this, iterating on each value name, and it will return a pair with the topic ID as the key and the name as the value. Now let's start with the button logic. In here we are going to need to get the player name and topic, validate against null with an alert if they are null, then make an API request to the microservice to have the game started. And finally, we will navigate to the CmpRound component, passing over the starting model with the game ID obtained from the microservice. So we are going to go to Functions, Events, right-click, and we are going to look for the button click event. And on the function, we are going to create a variable player name, and through a getValue blocky, we are going to get the name from the text box. Then we are going to validate the player name variable against a null value. And if we get a null value, we are going to show an alert with the alert-message blocky. We are going to do the exact same process for the topic, taking into account that the getValue for the topic will return the key for the selected value. We can just use copy and paste, checking for the changes here. Now we do a microservice request to the StartGame endpoint, passing over the player name and topic ID, and we are going to store the game ID on a local variable. Instead of creating a StartGameParams variable, we can choose to create the object inline with the player name and topic ID as attributes of this object. Lastly, we will navigate to the rounds component, passing over the game ID in the starting model. Remember that we need to create a routing for the CMP round component, so we can reach it using navigation block keys. So we are going to use /round-game for the routing. And we will create a game ID variable of type integer in the component model that will be marked as required. Let's now do a quick test to see how the component works. Let's start by running the application. And now let's try clicking on the Start Game without filling any fields, and we can see the error message. Now let's fill a game but with no topic, and we get the second error. And finally we fill both fields and we navigate correctly to the rounds component, which is what we were expecting. Now, and on the database, we can check the created game. So we go to the suite, servers, database, and making a query on the games table, we can see the created game.